Hello there, good evening. In 4 hours' time, after months of fighting, Israel and Hezbollah will be at peace after agreeing to a ceasefire. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has given his reasons tonight for the deal, saying we need to focus on the Iranian threat to rearm and to isolate Hamas, adding that he is changing the face of the Middle East. The two sides have been firing rockets for months. That escalated significantly in September when explosive devices were planted in pagers and handheld radios used by Hezbollah. Tonight's deal, though, does not mean there is peace in the region. Israel's military operation continues in Gaza. And in the last few moments, there are reports that Israel has issued evacuation warnings for the suburbs of Beirut. We'll get more from our Middle East correspondent in a moment. We don't yet know all the details of the deal, but let's take a look at what it could look like. Hezbollah are expected to move its forces north of the Litani River. Joe Biden confirmed that over the next 60 days, the Israel Defense Forces will withdraw from Lebanon. There have been reports that Lebanese forces could deploy to this buffer zone alongside the existing UN peacekeeping forces. Citizens from both countries who were evacuated or fled their border communities would be able to return to their homes. From Jerusalem, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this report.
A ceasefire is now only hours away, but Israel has continued to strike the Lebanese capital Beirut throughout the day. Black smoke rose above the southern suburbs, a Hezbollah stronghold that has been pounded over recent months. But at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, after almost 14 months of conflict, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah will come into force. President Biden announced it from the White House Rose Garden.
Under the deal reached today, effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Earlier on Tuesday evening, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a statement on Israeli television, assuring Israelis that he wouldn't hesitate to act if Hezbollah violated the deal.
In full understanding with the United States, we maintain full military freedom of action. If Hezbollah violates the agreement and tries to arm itself, we will attack. If it tries to renew terrorist infrastructure near the border, we will attack.
After months of cross-border fire, Israel invaded southern Lebanon on the 1st of October this year. The IDF has steadily pushed north in recent weeks. These pictures were released today of Israeli soldiers crossing the Litani River, many kilometers deep into Lebanon. Around 60,000 Israelis have been displaced from their homes along the border for over a year. Many of them don't believe it is safe to return yet and oppose a ceasefire now. Is now a good time? Is now the right time for Israel to enter a ceasefire with Hezbollah, in your opinion?
Everyone, including myself, are afraid that Hezbollah will recover, are afraid that nobody will implement the agreement except for Israel. Hezbollah is still a member of the Lebanese government, and Iran is still very much behind it. And while these two are still working, we don't see how things are going to truly change in the future, and how any player will stop Hezbollah from recovering.
In Lebanon, around 1.2 million people have had to leave their homes. Many of the villages and towns there have also been badly damaged or destroyed by the Israeli ground invasion. It will take both sides years to rebuild.
The cost of this war has been very high. The amount of destruction, the death toll, the total freeze of the economy, and the wave of displaced people in 2006, we have not seen that. And what we witnessed for the last 2 months is systematic destruction of what we call the stronghold of Hezbollah.
Tonight there were celebrations on the streets of Lebanese cities. After well over a year of war, it is a significant moment. In the short term, this will bring some relief to both sides, but it is a fragile peace, and Israel's successes might only prove short-term. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Live in Jerusalem for us tonight, and our US correspondent James Matthews is in Washington. Celebrations then in Lebanon, Alistair, but what reaction there in Israel?
Well, a lot more skepticism in Israel. The vote was approved by the Security Cabinet 10-1, so it wasn't unanimous. The one dissenting voice was Itamar Ben-Gvir, the far-right national security minister. A lot of Israelis don't believe that Hezbollah will keep their side of the deal, and those that live on the northern border, tens of thousands of whom have been displaced, don't feel the conditions are yet right for them to return home. I have to say there are serious questions about how successful this ceasefire will be. Essentially, it is based on the UN Resolution 1701 that ended the war in 2006, and that proved to be a flawed ceasefire because Hezbollah over the years rebuilt, rearmed and positioned themselves on the Israeli border. So there is a fear that the same could happen again because last time the UN peacekeeping force and the Lebanese armed forces were not strong enough to prevent Hezbollah from doing that, and many people believe that nothing has changed. There is this slightly new dynamic though with the US guaranteeing to oversee the ceasefire with the French, although exactly how that will work, we're not quite sure. But let's look at some of the positives. I think that this will probably calm Iran, and a prospect of any future Iranian attacks on Israel might seep away. The same could be said as well for Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. And of course, for the people of Israel and the people of Lebanon, after 14 months, almost 14 months of cross-border fire, it should bring about some peace. But it is not peace in the Middle East. The war in Gaza continues. The conditions there get ever worse, if that was possible, with the onset now of winter rain. And despite what President Biden had to say about his hopes for a future ceasefire in Gaza, I have to say, speaking tonight, it does not look likely right now.
Well, James, a US-led ceasefire is how this is being described. Another push to end the war in Gaza coming, we heard from the US president. So can Joe Biden claim this finally is a success for him in the Middle East?
Good evening, Anna. It is a measure of success, certainly. Joe Biden was very quick to his feet to claim a triumph, because this is, to be fair, a US brokered deal. I suppose the hard test will be in a few hours when this ceasefire is supposed to kick in. I mean, it is de-escalation, a measure of de-escalation at a time when all the talk and all the fear had been around escalation. In the past couple of hours, Joe Biden, since he gave that speech in the Rose Garden, he's headed to Nantucket for Thanksgiving weekend. He was asked about the prospects for a hostage release in Gaza. His answer was that a lot of pressure is now on Hamas. But the whole Gaza situation is his difficulty, the shadow of failure, the shadow of a lack of necessary influence on his part to bring about a peaceful resolution. I suppose the hope for him is that what's happened today further isolates Hamas and perhaps steers them towards the will to seek a settlement of the conflict. But I have to tell you, the US officials who offered guidance here on the course and the denouement of conflict in the Middle East, they're not offering any encouragement that there will be a peace settlement in Joe Biden's time. That is something, if it happens at all, that will happen perhaps in a different time under a different president.
James in Washington, Alistair in Jerusalem. Thanks to both of you. Russia has banned members of the British government from entering the country, including the Deputy Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary. Earlier today, Russia expelled a British diplomat over spying claims. The UK says it's not the first time Moscow has made what it called malicious and baseless accusations against its staff. Let's go live to Moscow and our correspondent Ivor Bennett. So spying allegations, government ministers barred. Ivor, is Russia still smarting at Britain's approval of the use of long-range weapons by Ukraine?
Good evening, Anna. Yes, it certainly does feel like that, doesn't it? First of all, on this blacklistings, 30 British citizens, mostly members of the cabinet, have been banned from entering Russia, accused of Moscow of anti-Russian activities. They include the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. The move hasn't been explicitly linked to the decision on long-range missiles last week, with Britain allowing Ukraine to fire Storm Shadows deep inside Russia. But it's hard not to see the two as being connected. The move, you'll remember, sparked fury in the Kremlin, with Russia accusing Britain of being directly involved in the war in Ukraine. And I think this really is part of Russia's backlash. The diplomatic expulsion seems related as well, along with the very public summoning of Britain's ambassador to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here today. When he arrived at the ministry, the ambassador, Nigel Casey, you see here, was greeted by a cast of Russian camera crews and TV reporters, with the footage of his arrival then splashed all over TV bulletins. As state media sought to make it as public as possible, they also named the diplomat involved, broadcast his photo as well. The diplomat was accused of spying and providing false information when he entered Russia, claims that the Foreign Office dismissed as baseless and malicious. But given the way the news was covered here very publicly, it felt like Russia was trying to shape public opinion here, part of their continued attempt to cast Britain and Ukraine's allies as the enemy out to destroy Russia. We heard a lot of that kind of language last week around the issue of long-range missiles, you remember, and this feels very much part of that too.
Ivor, in Moscow, thank you. The Vauxhall factory in Luton has been making vehicles for more than a century, but now the owner says it plans to shut it down, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. That owner, Stellantis, said it is hoping to transfer hundreds of Luton jobs to the group's Vauxhall site at Ellesmere Port in Cheshire. The business secretary has called it a better outcome than it could have been. But one of those who's worked there for more than 30 years has told Sky News the government needs to step in. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
Vauxhall has been making cars and vans here since 1905, but Luton's 120th year will be its last. The closure putting 1,100 jobs at risk after talks with unions and government ended in failure.
We believe there's a decision that didn't need to be made and doesn't need to be made. We're a profitable plant. We've been building 500 units a day, and we've got a good workforce. I think we need the government to step in to find what solution can be found for Luton. Otherwise, we're about to lose 120 years of history for the town.
Vauxhall will continue to make electric vans at its Ellesmere Port plant on Merseyside, but its owners Stellantis blame the Luton closure on government plans to transition to zero-emission vehicles that manufacturers believe will force them to produce cars not enough consumers are ready or able to buy.
Their request was to look at some of the specific aspects, some of the flexibilities around how the ZEV mandate works. Myself and the Secretary of State for Transport were, of course, willing to have that conversation, but we were told this morning that the decision has been made.
Under plans to end new petrol and diesel vehicle sales by 2030, manufacturers must make a proportion of electric vehicles each year or pay a £15,000 fine for every one outside the target. This year, the target for cars is 22%. But the forecast is only 19% of sales will be all electric. And for vans, the target is 10%, with only 6% of sales due to comply. News that these gates will close for good came just a few hours before Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, was due to tell industry leaders he will review those electric vehicle targets, an admission perhaps that without incentives, they're simply too expensive for many private buyers. But this is now a fundamental challenge to a government that has promised to deliver green growth and already faces a crisis of confidence from business. With Chinese manufacturers and all-electric pioneers like Tesla dominating EV production, Britain and Europe have been left standing.
Suddenly you've got this very, very competitive, if not incentivised industry that is eating the lunch of the traditional players. So in a market that was already tough, it's just that much harder to make money.
The UK may yet catch up, but it'll be too late for Luton. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Luton.
The government has said today it will get Britain working again, and this is why. Nearly 11 million working-age people are not in paid jobs. The majority, 9 million, are economically inactive, meaning they were not actively looking for work or available to start a job. Almost 1 million are young people, that's 1 in 8, between the ages of 16 and 24. 2.8 million people say they're not economically active because of long-term sickness. The government is proposing to create jobs and careers service at job centres, local authorities to lead training and employment opportunities, extra support too for NHS trusts in most inactive areas. Sky Social Affairs correspondent Becky Johnson reports.
I struggle with anxiety and depression, and also my confidence has been it's gone down a little bit compared to what it was prior.
Olivia hasn't worked for 4 years. She had a baby during the pandemic and her mental health deteriorated. Now 23, she's living on universal credit and can't afford full-time childcare.
I'm trying to find something that can fit in with the part-time hours and also that I can kind of cope with.
I mean, some people would say, you know, there are cafes, there are bars, there are cleaning jobs, there are jobs all over the place that you could apply for. So why don't you?
For me, I think the barriers are the anxieties of being out of work for so long.
She's been getting advice from this charity that helps people into employment. They've seen a big increase in young people saying they're too ill to work.
The pandemic has a lot to play. We're kind of seeing a generation of young people that lived through those pandemic years. So often it can be kind of low level, low self-esteem.
But Jordan, who's 23 and on sickness benefits, says the welfare system discourages some from applying for work.
It more incentivizes people to sit at home really and just not look for a job.
And is that because you'd lose your benefits if you got a job?
Yeah. The way that some people see it is that you're literally just going to be getting money from the government for literally nothing.
What's happening here in Romford is mirrored around the country. The Prime Minister says Labour inherited a country that isn't working.
In order to boost the economy, the government has to fix this issue of worklessness, in particular, why so many people are off sick. To put it into context, health-related benefits cost more than the entire UK policing budget. And think about this, while so many British people aren't working, there remains a need for foreigners to fill vacancies, making it more difficult for the government to tackle another issue, immigration.
Reforms announced include transforming job centres into careers services and more money for the NHS in areas with the highest numbers off work.
This white paper starts to turn the corner on the last 14 years, putting forward the real reforms we need to get more people into work and on at work, to give young people the very best start in life.
The talk now is of help, but many expect sanctions will follow for people who don't take up support being offered. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Romford.
Women are half as likely as men to find a job within 6 months of the end of their prison sentence, according to data. The government says for many women, prison isn't working, which is why it says it's creating a board aimed at exploring alternatives. But one prison in Cheshire is taking efforts into its own hands. Sky's home editor, Jason Farrell, has tonight's special report on life behind bars and rehabilitation.
Go inside Style Prison near Manchester, and in the far corner of the estate there's a workshop. What happens here looks destructive, but amid the smash and clatter, something is being rebuilt. These women's lives, one broken TV at a time.
When I came in here, it looked like everyone was in the gym.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Does that help?
Yeah, do you know what it does? It just... You get a lot of frustration out because obviously a lot of us have got a lot of anger, do you know what I mean?
Here they're learning skills that could stop them coming back. 6 months after leaving prison, women are half as likely as men to be employed, and people without work are more likely to re-offend.
So if they do 70 a day, they earn £10.
Right.
Yeah.
Yvonne is the first former prisoner at Style who now has keys to the prison, employed here as workshop manager.
What are you trying to give to these women?
I'm trying to give them a future. I'm trying to give them some hope that they can get the children back, find a job, find a home, and there is a different life. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Wrapped in high fences and barbed wire are austere Victorian houses, once an orphanage, now the accommodation blocks of Style Prison. The only soft thing here is Ted, the prison cat. It's a female prison, but often a man has had some influence on their crimes.
90% of the women in prison, that there's always a male involved in why they've committed crime. Yeah. Obviously speaking personally, because it is the case with me as well, so yeah.
Female prisoners have different demons to men. 60% will have experienced domestic violence. Many have known physical or sexual abuse as a child. For Yvonne, though, the hardest thing was being jailed as a mother.
The biggest thing for me was leaving my children. Yeah. I still carry that guilt around. Why I came to prison 3 times and left him 3 times, I don't know, but I did.
This programme, Recycling TV Sets, is called Recycling Lives. And it continues on the outside in their depot in Preston. It's food they're recycling from supermarkets and farms to community food banks.
Yeah, no matter where they are in their life or what they're doing, they choose to come here every day and do that.
Here we meet Naomi, who 3 years since being released from jail now runs this warehouse.
I was put in prison when my baby was only 3 months old, so it was like losing an arm, like losing a piece of my DNA.
In and out of prison since she was 15, she was first jailed for breaching an ASBO and feels even short prison sentences can ruin lives.
They take women who've robbed a block of cheese to feed the child, they put them in prison for 28 days, they take the home, they take the kids, they lose their family, and they get out with nothing. You've just created a criminal right there. You've just created a woman who's got nothing to lose.
Yeah. So they're more likely to reoffend?
No reason not to. You're also releasing them with a sleeping bag and a tent and telling them to go and sleep in the woods.
It's why, with women being mostly non-violent offenders serving short sentences, the government is setting up a Women's Justice Board to explore reducing the number who go to prison and how to offer better rehabilitation.
There are a lot more factors that the women have to contend with. There's children, there's maybe domestic abuse, there's domestic violence. And when you change a woman's life, you're often changing the family's life, you're changing the children's life.
Prison is supposed to be part punishment, part repair job. But there are few programmes like this, and for many women, jail is adding to the damage. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Dozens of British troops are to be deployed to help track down those responsible for flying drones near US Air Force bases in the UK. Overnight, a number of drones were spotted close to the 3 US bases in Norfolk and Suffolk, the second such incident in a week. 5 survivors have been rescued today and 4 bodies recovered after a tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. 2 British people are among those still missing. Egyptian military forces, which are coordinating rescue operations, have now rescued 37 people out of the 44 on board. Rescue teams have been intensifying efforts to find the remaining 7 still missing. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his country must stay united against a threat by Donald Trump to impose tariffs. The president-elect has said he would sign executive orders bringing in tariffs on his first day in the White House and threatened to target goods from Canada, China and Mexico, America's 3 biggest suppliers. Economists have warned tariffs could impact American consumers by leading to higher prices for petrol, cars and electronics like phones and TVs. Now, Glastonbury has announced its first act for next year's festival, and it's none other than friend of the show, Sir Rod Stewart. He'll take to the Pyramid stage on Sunday afternoon to play the Legends slot, having headlined the festival back in 2002. Alice Porter has more.
After 23 years, Sir Rod Stewart's raspy voice, leather trousers and thrusting hips will return to Glastonbury. He'll perform in the coveted Sunday afternoon Legend slot on the Pyramid stage. Posting on X, he said, "After all these years, I'm proud and ready and more than able to take the stage again to pleasure and titillate my friends at Glastonbury in June. I'll see you there. So Rod will follow in the footsteps of Kylie Minogue, Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie and, most recently, Shania Twain, who all performed in the Legends slot. His successful music career over 7 decades cements his legendary status. When he headlined at Glastonbury in 2002, alongside Coldplay and Stereophonics, tickets cost just £97. Now, they're £373.50. So will 79-year-old Sir Rod be good value for money?
It represents a bit of a homecoming. We still have this huge sheet of international superstars, the Rolling Stones still going strong. I mean, some people say that they're bed blockers, that they're crowding out the audience from other acts emerging and wanting that space. But Glastonbury does prove that there is something for everyone.
Last week, Sir Rod announced that his international touring days were behind him. Worthy Farm is clearly a different story. Alice Porter, Sky News.
If only we could get tickets. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda. Welcome to both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front page of The Guardian. Its headline, Biden hails historic ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Back with that and more after this.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said he will put a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah to his cabinet. Let's just show you the latest pictures then. More bombings in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, after Israel announced another evacuation order just before that ceasefire is set to take effect at 2 a.m. UK time. Britain's ambassador in Moscow has been summoned to discuss a British diplomat expelled after being accused of espionage by Russia. And Vauxhall has confirmed plans to shut a van factory in Luton, putting 1,100 jobs at risk. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj and the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda. Welcome to both of you. So let's take a look at the front pages then, starting with The Guardian. It's splash leading on US President Joe Biden announcing that a ceasefire deal between Israel and Lebanon will come into effect at 2 a.m. in the morning. The Financial Times carries a warning from Mexico, Canada and China outlining damage to the US in the event of Donald Trump's announced tariffs coming in. I lost my faith in the world. The dance class teacher injured while protecting children during the Southport stabbings speaks for the first time on the front of the Metro. The Telegraph reports that the government may water down rules around electrical vehicles, following warnings from car makers about the future of the industry. Daily Mail leading on the same story, their headline, Labour's net zero electric car plan in chaos. The Express says households face a £50 Christmas dinner bill following the Chancellor's budget. The government's offering weight loss jabs to the unemployed to try to get people back to work, that is according to The Eye. And staying with weight, the Daily Star says Donald Trump has asked wrestling legend Hulk Hogan to help make America fit again when he assumes office. But a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head to Ali and to Sonia. Welcome to both of you. And kicking off with the breaking news from tonight, which is a ceasefire, at last, you would argue, between Israel and Hezbollah. The Guardian, Sonia, calling it historic, quoting Joe Biden, amidst bombing again this evening.
Absolutely. It's a 60-day ceasefire. The US has obviously been working very, very hard behind the scenes to make it happen. I think there's a lot of people who weren't quite sure if we were going to get here. In Israel, the cabinet has voted for it. Now, there's obviously opposition still from the far-right minister that Netanyahu's got in his government, Ben-Gvir, but it doesn't look like that is going to thwart this ceasefire. I think the Israeli cabinet is still going ahead with it. So that's very good news. Obviously, there are some health warnings to put around this. The first is this is a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. It's not a ceasefire, the much hoped-for ceasefire that people have been wanting for months between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. So that is the first thing. So it will temper things in the region, obviously, and hopefully make things better. But it's not a ceasefire, a Middle East ceasefire. And the second thing is, of course, is that this is coming towards the end of the Biden presidency. And who knows what a Trump presidency, what that's going to mean for the Middle East and what that means for this particular ceasefire. So, this is, I think it's a step forwards. It's a step forwards towards peace. But that's all it is, a step in the right direction.
It has been a truly extraordinary couple of months, hasn't it, certainly. The pager attack, which kicked off this war, effectively, even though Israel says Hezbollah was firing rockets from the 8th of October, the day after the 7th of October terror attacks. The pager attacks, the handheld walkie-talkies, you know, the implanting of explosives in the production line, the killing of Hezbollah leaders, including Hassan Nasrallah, the invasion, the incursion itself in the south. And here we are, you know, just over 3 months later with a ceasefire. So what's left now of relations, effectively, between Lebanon and Israel, not Hezbollah, and what does this mean for Hezbollah? Does it survive as a political and fighting force?
Well, you can never write off Hezbollah because they've always been at loggerheads, Israel and Hezbollah, and they potentially will go back and retreat and then regroup. But I think what's clear is that both sides here, both Israel and Hezbollah, want a ceasefire. Israel wants one because 54% of its military personnel have been working more than 100 days. They're getting very stretched now. They need a break. Hezbollah, for its part, I mean, its fighters also are very, very stretched. Now, this has cost a lot in lives already. 3,700 Lebanese people have been killed, 140 Israelis, 1 million Lebanese displaced, 60,000 Israelis displaced from the northern part of Israel. This is going to be governed and overseen by apparently 5 states, including the US, which is going to be the main arbiter of this, which is going to be very interesting to see if this holds in the long term. You go back to 2006, Resolution 1701, which was meant to be trying to deal with this thing, and it all fell apart quite quickly because Hezbollah was going to regroup. This is what's happening here is that the Hezbollah is going to move their heavy weaponry north of the Litani River. That's going to create this buffer zone. Lebanese troops will move in. We'll have to see how it holds. But there's been a lot of suffering on all sides. And we thought that the first ceasefire would come between Hamas and Israel. And it might actually be the case that the catalyst for that is the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, we hope.
Because clearly northern Gaza is still being decimated. You know, Israel making clear it still wants to chase down, you know, the final Hamas leaders,
yes.
Despite so many deaths of their leadership too. And Joe Biden saying there will be another push by the US in the coming days, he said, to sort out Gaza. You know, this is sort of legacy building, I guess, for Joe Biden to put this behind him so that Donald Trump can't claim a success when he comes in mid-January.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's, you know, I guess in some ways this transition between presidencies, it's sort of, when you look at global conflicts, it couldn't be timed worse in some ways, in the sense that it does create a significant degree of instability, and you know, people are thinking, what is this new administration going to mean? So I think it is, yes, partly legacy building, but I also think for the Biden administration, the fact that they've only got, you know, however many weeks it is left, they're trying to get as much done as they possibly can to leave things in the best possible state, given, I think, there are fears about the instability that a Trump presidency could cause.
And the difficulty for Benjamin Netanyahu, it was always said, would he face elections at the end of all of this? You know, the accusation from those critical of him that he's kept it going because he doesn't want to see political instability in Israel. You know, there are so many questions. Should the Gaza situation be sorted, including who's going to rebuild Gaza? Where do people live in the interim? How do they survive?
Well, it's a massive question. And the real issue, which has never been addressed in any of this, is you can keep pummeling Gaza, and they have, and it's cost 44,000 lives. And the Israelis would argue that that is because they've been trying to root Hamas terrorists, but a lot of innocent people have been killed in that, particularly kids. And you think about what is the long-term solution for peace here, and no one's really put their shoulders to the wheel on that at all.
No,
so,
and it feels like we've just keep moving backwards as opposed to forwards.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is the issue, because ultimately you can pummel and bomb as much as you want, and they have, and the argument they would give is that we're trying to protect our people. They're now going to be trying to implement the so-called General's Plan, which is to starve the northern Gazans, which is, a lot of people would say, a complete contravention of any normal approach to any conflict.
I mean, Israel, to be fair, has denied that. Says
they
it does let aid in, and it lists the aid that comes in. But then
Island is very, very open about what's been happening here and what the plan is, and that's what seems to be happening. So I do think that the long-term peace is something that has not really been focused on at all.
OK. Let's just show you the eye as well. It's up the top. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it came late for the papers. You know, you will see if they've changed their front pages. Perhaps there is scepticism, too, of people. Netanyahu unveils Hezbollah ceasefire after a year of war. The front page there of the eye. In the meantime, what has the Luton decision meant about electric car plans?
So this is Stellantis, which is the big global company that owns Vauxhall, the car manufacturer. And they have announced that they're going to be closing their plant in Luton. And there's 1,100 automotive car industry jobs in Luton. And it's not clear what's going to happen to those jobs, but certainly I think a lot are going to be lost. Now, Stellantis are blaming it on the government's targets to move everyone over, or at least the new sales of vehicles over to electric vehicles. And essentially, the last government had a 2030 target for all new cars to be electric when they're sold. They then moved that back to like 2035. Then Labour came in and they moved the target back again, or forward again, I should say, to 2030. Now, what that means is that over a number of years, car manufacturers have to meet quotas for how many electric vehicles they're selling. And this year, it's about 22%, but it's going to go up and up and up, you know, 80%, and then finally 100% in that target year, 2030. Now, the issue is that car manufacturers are saying, there's just not enough demand for the electric vehicles. So I think sales this year, or was it last year, were 18%. So it's not as high as the quota for which they've got to sell. And so that leads to a tricky problem. And I think it shows one of the difficulties with the net zero agenda. It's incredibly important. We've got to get to net zero. Actually, I think this 2030 target for new sales of electric vehicles is really important. But you've got to bring the consumer demand along with you, because otherwise car manufacturers are saying, actually, we're just not going to be producing cars in the same way in the UK. And that is the last thing that Rachel Reeves needs, to see car industry jobs go in the UK. You know, this plant has been around for a very long time. It's going to be devastating for people who work there and who are at risk of losing their jobs. You know, and we've seen the same go on in steel. So it just shows how difficult it is to balance all these different things.
Yep. Look, I think Sonia's outlined it very clearly. There are also issues with the ecosystem around this. So with electric vehicles, you need electric vehicle charging infrastructure up and down the country. People have range anxiety because they worry about being able to charge their car somewhere. So that is something that is not always investable for people. The government has to come in and step in and provide some subsidy for private investors to roll out EV charging infrastructure, particularly in areas with lower density as well. So that's one thing. You also look at the gigafactories now that are producing the batteries for these cars. Look at what's happened to Northvolt, which has just filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the US. Huge issue there. So you've got to take people with you, but people only be taken with you if they feel the infrastructure is there to support this whole thing. So it's quite circular, looks really bad, and it comes at a time when Rachel Reeves is having a tough time. I mean, she's upset the pensioners, she's upset the CBI, she's upset big business, she's even upset the banks. And now she's in a situation where 1,100 jobs are going to be lost from Luton. This is not a good look for a chancellor. And I think, look, to govern is to choose, and governance is not easy. I don't think it's an easy thing for her to deal with, but certainly very, very bad news for Labour.
Yeah, I mean, it's the antithesis of growth, isn't it? That's
absolutely.
The point. And what people are saying is that actually you're penalising British manufacturers while in effect supporting the Chinese, who are rolling out EVs as quick as you can. You know, that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what do? Do they recognise? Let's go to The Guardian, shall we? Do they recognise that it's time to adjust, like Rishi Sunak did, the targets that they set, or change the levels?
That sounds like it sounds like that's what's about to happen. So I'm not sure that the 2030 date is going to move, but they are consulting on doing things differently. And I think what they're going to do is sort of backload the quotas, so it's going to go up more slowly in terms of the proportion of cars that they need to sell that are electric, and then it's going to get faster and faster up till 2030. So is that going to work? I mean, it's
only 6 years away.
Exactly. And the thing is, this is a transition that we have to make. But there are trade-offs to it, right? And it's very, very difficult. But I guess what people who are pro the quotas would say is the government's got to be a market shaper when it comes to the green agenda. And
but if the consumer is missing, with concerns about how batteries hold their power, for example, lack of infrastructure, can't go large distances because nobody's put the investment in.
I think there's a danger.
Maybe you've got to go back to subsidies to get people to buy these cars, but then that's expensive. That's expensive, and we don't have a lot of money in the bank at the moment, so it's tricky.
I think there's a danger here. I had a conversation about this on my show the other day about is the environmental consensus really breaking down a little bit here? Because, many of us do recognise the importance of decarbonisation, greening the economy and all of these things, and Ed Miliband's leading from the front. You've got Starmer going to COP29 and basically being one of the few leaders at the front and centre saying, we're going to be leading this. And you're thinking, OK, that's all very well, but have you really consulted the British public? Where are they in all of this? And Sonia's right. They're going to be trying to back-end this uptake of EVs being sold by these car manufacturers. There's meant to be 22% this year. I think Vauxhall's at about 18%. And what they're going to say is we're not going to move it back to 2035 like Sunak did. It's going to be 2030. You're going to back-end it, but it's only 5 years to go. So is it really practical to do that? I mean, you can't just roll out electric vehicle charging points like this overnight. You've got to. I think subsidy is the way forward, but then again, with a cash-strapped government, which is just, coming up with 70 billion. I mean,
and you do sometimes forget that we're in 2020. But, when I say 2030, to me, that sounds like a really long time away. And then you reminded me it's 5 years away. And we're not living in the 2010s anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We'll certainly keep an eye on that, I think, don't you? But it's, it's a big change, or it could be a big change to follow from that decision. Coming up, could businesses face more tax rises after what Rachel Reeves said yesterday? Back in a moment.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
I'm Lisa Dowd, and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends.
We've got a heck of a race.
This is when the Premier League properly clicks into gear. With the reigning champions against perhaps their most likely challengers.
Liverpool, Manchester City,
the summit meeting of English football's top two.
Liverpool, Manchester City on USA.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
yes.
Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want to jump in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview. With me once again, Ali Miraj and Sonia Soda. Welcome back to both of you. Let us go to the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Businesses may face more tax raids despite Reeves's pledge, which happened at the CBI conference yesterday, in which he said there won't be another budget like that one, which made everybody think there would be no more hefty taxes on business. Not so, it seems, Ali.
Well, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, is effectively not endorsing that and has said that that was really couched in a way to deal with the wiping the slate clean, so they say, following the hospital past they inherited. But that doesn't mean that she's not going to come back and ask for more taxes. So, again, I think language really matters here because people are already saying that Labour's broken pledges that they already made. I mean, the farmers are saying that, and now you're going to have business saying the same. And it also leaves a hostage to fortune. I mean, who would have thought that we would have had a COVID pandemic? So you can't predict the future. So to say it unequivocally in black and white that I will not be coming back to you for this kind of budget, she can't. I mean, on what basis can she say that? So I think there's a bit of a credibility problem here. The CBI, a lot of people, she got very tepid applause at the CBI. It wasn't a great response. People are concerned. They're concerned on a few fronts. One is the massive increase in employers' national insurance and the reduction of the level at which it's paid from 9,100 to 5,000. That's actually going to hurt the recruitment of workers, which the Labour Party purports to support or represent. You've also got a situation where the minimum wage has gone up as well. And this is causing real problems for businesses. And you also have a package of workers' measures as well that's coming in, which is again going to put people off recruiting people. So you've got a triple whammy on business. And it just makes you think, does this government really understand business? I mean, business was actually quite enthused about having a stable government coming in. Investment was actually meant to be going up. It's going the wrong way now. I mean, now we've got the McVitie's chairman saying, or chief executive saying, the UK is uninvestable.
I mean, look, Rachel Reeves inherited a really tough set of circumstances, but the problem is she had to put tax had to go up from somewhere, and you know she had to generate some more revenue.
I'm going to move. Do you mind if I move on because we've heard all of those arguments,
of course,
not least from every cabinet minister who ever appears on television.
Okay. I defer to them. And we actually have got an interesting subject.
They booked themselves into a corner. We've got two quick stories, if you don't mind. First of all, FT, the damage that tariffs could cause, a la Trump, is starting to be played out in these nations who feel they're being walloped with high tariffs. So
he's gone ahead and said that he's going to introduce tariffs on goods coming in from Canada, Mexico and China. And, you know, you can see from the reactions, people were really worried about this because if Trump does launch this global trade war, putting tariffs on goods, it's basically going to drive up prices and inflation everywhere. Hugely consequential for us here in the UK. So that's what's playing out.
Yeah, and that's so far, ... what for Europe is the point, isn't it, I guess?
Well, Europe has to decide what it wants to do. I mean, the UK is trying to keep its head down, but it could be inflation. And the other thing that is not being thought through properly, I think, by the Trump administrations or incoming administration is intermediate goods. You put tariffs on intermediate goods, that could actually increase prices and actually hurt the very workers that Trump wants to support.
Oh, it's all fun and games, isn't it? My goodness me. Thank you both very much indeed. See you for more at 11. Another storm cometh. Let's take a look at the weather. So, some rain in the south tonight and tomorrow, which may lead to some disruption. Much of southern Britain will start wet. Strong winds in the far south. Elsewhere, largely dry, clear and calm with a widespread frost and some dense fog patches. Rain over southern parts will become increasingly confined to eastern England through the morning. Heaviest in the windy southeast. Elsewhere, staying mainly dry, plenty of sunshine. Fog will be slow to lift and there will be a few coastal showers. Cold for many, less so near Channel coasts. Our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. Benjamin Netanyahu confirms he'll recommend a ceasefire deal. More on that to come.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky